The rain had been falling steadily for hours that evening in Austin, Texas. The windows of the Mitchell household fogged lightly from the warmth inside, a sharp contrast to the cool, stormy air outside. Rebecca Mitchell stood in the kitchen, her hands wrapped around a steaming mug of chamomile tea. She was 42 years old, a woman who had lived most of her adult life devoted to her marriage with Daniel Mitchell, her husband of nearly 20 years. They had raised 2 children together, both now away at college, and the house often felt too quiet. Rebecca's husband, Daniel, was dependable, steady, and hardworking. He ran a small construction business that demanded most of his attention. He was a good man and Rebecca loved him, but lately their marriage felt more like a routine than a romance. There were days when she barely saw him, nights when he fell asleep on the couch with paperwork scattered on his chest, and weekends when his phone never stopped buzzing with calls from clients. That evening, the quiet house was broken by the sound of the front door opening. Rebecca looked up as Daniel's nephew, Jason Miller, stepped inside, brushing rain from his dark hair. Jason was 25, tall, with an easy smile that seemed to brighten even the grayest of days. He had come from Dallas to stay with them for a few weeks while he looked for work in Austin. "Hey, Aunt Rebecca," Jason said warmly, setting his duffel bag by the door. "Thanks again for letting me crash here. I promise I'll stay out of the way." Rebecca smiled, her heart softening. "Jason, your family. You don't need to thank us. Come on, let's get you settled." From the beginning, Jason's presence filled the house with a kind of energy Rebecca hadn't realized was missing. He laughed easily, offered to help with chores without being asked, and had a way of listening that made her feel heard. One afternoon, when the garage door jammed and she struggled to fix it, Jason appeared with a toolbox in hand. "Let me help," he said gently, crouching beside her. His hands moved with practiced skill, and within minutes, the door was working again. Rebecca exhaled in relief. "Daniel's been promising to fix that for months. You're a lifesaver." Jason shrugged, smiling. "Happy to help. Uncle Dan's got a lot on his plate. I don't mind picking up the slack." That phrase, "picking up the slack," lingered in Rebecca's mind long after he said it. Jason wasn't just kind. He was attentive. When she cooked, he offered to chop vegetables. When she seemed tired, he made her tea. When she looked lonely, he struck up conversations that stretched into late-night talks at the dining table. At first, it felt harmless. She was simply enjoying the company of someone who noticed her, who treated her with a tenderness she hadn't felt in years. But slowly, the lines began to blur. One evening, while Daniel was away on a work trip, Rebecca and Jason sat on the porch as rain pattered softly against the roof. The night air was cool, and fireflies glimmered in the distance. Jason leaned back in his chair, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "you remind me a lot of my mom. She passed when I was 15, and you've always been the one in the family who made me feel safe." Rebecca's heart tightened. She reached over and squeezed his hand gently. "I loved your mother dearly. If I can give you even a fraction of the comfort she gave, then I'm glad." Jason's eyes met hers, and for a moment, there was a heaviness in the air that neither could name. It wasn't romantic, not yet, but it was intimate. It was an emotional closeness that crossed the invisible boundaries Rebecca had always honored in her marriage. Over the next few weeks, Rebecca found herself confiding in Jason about things she rarely shared with Daniel. She spoke of her loneliness, her fear of becoming invisible as she aged, her longing for more than the quiet routines of her marriage. Jason listened with compassion, never judging, always affirming. But what began as comfort grew complicated. One evening, after a particularly long day, Rebecca sat on the couch, exhausted. Jason came into the room, carrying a blanket. "You looked cold earlier," he said, draping it gently over her shoulders. His kindness felt like a balm to her weary soul. "Jason," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You're too good to me." His reply was soft, almost inaudible. "You deserve it." Rebecca's breath caught in her throat. She knew, deep down, that she was standing at the edge of something dangerous. This wasn't just gratitude anymore. This was temptation. She pulled away slightly, clutching the blanket tighter. Jason, you've been so kind, but we can't, this isn't right. He nodded, his expression serious. I know. I'd never want to hurt Uncle Dan. You've just been like a light in my life, Aunt Rebecca. That's all. Rebecca felt her chest tighten with both relief and regret. She realized then that this emotional closeness was already a form of infidelity. She hadn't touched him, hadn't crossed any physical line, but in her heart, she had shared a part of herself that belonged to her husband. When Daniel returned from his trip, he noticed subtle changes in his wife. She smiled more, laughed more, seemed livelier. But he also noticed the way Jason's eyes lingered on her, the way their conversations carried an ease that his own with Rebecca had lost. One night, Daniel confronted her gently. Rebecca, he said, his voice calm but firm, I can't help but feel distant from you lately, like you're sharing pieces of yourself with someone else. Tears welled in her eyes. She couldn't deny it. You're right, Daniel. I've been lonely. And Jason, he's been kind in ways I didn't realize I needed. But nothing happened. I swear to you. Daniel's jaw tightened, but his eyes softened with pain. Emotional betrayal hurts just as much as the other kind, Rebecca. I wish you had come to me instead. Her heart broke in that moment. She realized how far she had drifted, how easily kindness had turned into temptation. The days that followed were filled with tension, with unspoken words hanging in the air. Jason, sensing the shift, quietly packed his bags and left earlier than planned. Rebecca and Daniel sat in silence the night he left, the house feeling emptier than before. Finally, Rebecca spoke. Daniel, I never wanted to hurt you. I just needed to feel seen. He reached across the table, taking her hand. Then, let's start again. Let me see you, Rebecca. Let me try. It wasn't easy. Healing never is. But in the weeks that followed, they began rebuilding. They went on evening walks together, cooked meals side by side, and slowly found their way back to the kind of intimacy they had lost. Rebecca knew she would always remember Jason's kindness, but she also knew that kindness had nearly cost her everything. And so she chose to cherish it as a reminder, not of what she had almost done, but of what she had to protect: her marriage, her family, her vows. The storm outside eventually passed, and with it, the storm inside their marriage. Rebecca learned that true fidelity wasn't just about physical faithfulness, it was about guarding the heart, even when no one else was looking.